Even men at the top of their game find themselves wanting more from life. Whether it's more meaning, unshakable confidence, a bigger impact, more money, deeper love, a hotter sex life, or a powerful legacy. Find out how good your life can be on this episode of Man Alive. Also, as I've supported men in their love and work lives for 15 years now, many men ask for the right words to say to be more successful, attractive, and desirable. But I found it's not so simple as giving scripts or lines because every man is different. So giving words or scripts would be like giving a tall, thin man a shorter, wider man's pants, or vice versa. The words have to make sense for you and your personality, and there's so much happening beneath the surface that people are responding to. If you're interested in how to become a better lover and leader in your own unique way, go to shanajamescoaching.com/quiz, or you can text ALIVE to 44144. It only takes a couple minutes and you'll start to get an idea of how you can be both more respected and desired. After you fill it out, we can schedule a time to review your quiz and talk about your specific challenges and desires. So again, go to either shanajamescoaching.com/quiz or text ALIVE to 44144. That's ALIVE to 44144. Enjoy this episode of Man Alive. Hello and welcome to this episode of Man Alive. I am excited to be here today to talk about male health and the pillars of peak performance, and something that I think a lot of men don't actually know about that I didn't know about, which is called Andropause. And I'm here today with Dr. Nell Smircina. Welcome, Nell.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited for this discussion.
I'm excited too. We were both just saying, it's really amazing to get to be with another woman who's really passionate about supporting men. And so, you've been in this field of men's health and performance for a while. So I'm happy to bring your wisdom to men, especially around things like andropause, where, certain men, similar to women going through menopause, but women know, like we are all clear. Menopause is coming, for 10 or 15 years. We're like, is this it? Is that, am I going through it? And I think men have not been taught that there is a transition, a hormonal transition they go through. So tell us about andropause and what happens and when does it happen?
Yeah. So andropause is really interesting because, like you said, there's so much information around menopause and a lot of support as well. And I think a lot of times in society, there's this stigma that like, oh, well, women need this support and men don't need this support. Men are just going to be able to figure out and do what they need to do. And they're kind of like power through it.
Yeah.
But
which is what tends to happen, right? I mean,
exactly.
A lot of men don't go to the doctor if they're feeling pain or something changes. They just think more like, oh, either, it's my fault or there's something wrong with me, or I don't want to look weak or bad.
Absolutely. Huge stigma around all of that. And what's really crazy about it is, men are half as likely to seek out medical care as women, but then preventative care, it's an even larger disparity.
Yeah.
So when you're talking about, how am I going to optimize my health? How am I going to have healthy aging? How am I going to prevent certain diseases that I might be, genetically predisposed to? A lot of men are not getting that help and aren't realizing that there is a huge shift that goes on with andropause because it's a term that even most men have not heard of.
Yeah.
And no one's saying to them like, hey, you better be, prepared for this.
Yeah. So when does it start to show up and what starts to show up?
So nowadays, it can actually start as early as your 30s for men, but very commonly in your 40s and 50s. So, when those jokes about a midlife crisis start to come up, a lot of times it's around that same time. But what's happening is there is a natural decrease in testosterone, which, there's this assumption that that's like the only thing that goes on in the male body. Like, oh, if testosterone's going down, everything else is affected and it's the testosterone's fault. So I need more testosterone. When in actuality, low testosterone can be caused by a lot of different things, not simply by aging. It can be caused by chemical and toxic exposures. It can be caused by other hormonal imbalances. It can sometimes not even the testosterone's low, it's that the hormone balance itself is off. So a really interesting common symptom of having too much testosterone is hair loss in men.
What?
And
Too much testosterone.
too much testosterone a lot of times will cause hair loss. So you see these
Interesting.
like very masculine looking men with their muscles at the gym, or, they're these like hardcore performers and they're losing their hair. And a lot of times that's just due to too much testosterone to
What
other
happens?
relative hormones in their body.
Okay, and what happens, because I would think that for men, the idea of having a lot of testosterone or too much testosterone would be like, yes, I just want more of it. But I imagine there's a limit, there's a point at which too much causes a problem. So what happens? What's the pain of too much testosterone?
Particularly with too much synthetic testosterone, which is where the real danger comes in. Because a lot of times you'll do a hormone test, they'll say, oh, makes sense, you're 45, your testosterone's going down, so we're going to give you synthetic testosterone to boost that. Your body will say, oh, okay, I have enough testosterone, I can stop making this now.
Oh.
And so your body as a man will start producing less natural testosterone because there's a supplement involved.
Yep.
And the way that, really that should be remedied is looking at the cause of why is testosterone low to begin with.
Yep.
Is it maybe one of these other hormones or a precursor to testosterone? Do we need to boost something else so that testosterone still keeps going, rather than saying, let's supplement right away? Because that's when you run into the danger of your body not doing what it's supposed to do.
Oh my God, it's so common in our health system, at least in America. I'm not sure about the rest of the world, but to just look at the symptoms and try to throw supplements and medication at them rather than actually really looking at the cause of the issue.
Exactly. There's like this model that, okay, if you're sick, you take a pill, and if you're not sick, then you must be healthy.
Right.
And that is not the reality, definitely not in the US right now. We're seeing all of these chronic conditions, all of these lifestyle issues, different ways that things need to be addressed and treated. And that model is really, unfortunately, old medicine, and we need more of an integrative approach so that people can actually have their unique health addressed and their unique needs.
Yeah.
Not everybody's the same.
No, not everybody's the same. And that's what I appreciated as I was looking at your website, is that you actually work with men, it sounds like, to look at what is their unique makeup. So do you go in and do hormone testing, and what else do you check to see what's going well and what's not going well?
Well, all of that in my practice specifically starts with a really deep dive initial consultation with a ton of fun questionnaires to fill out. But we look at everything from how your neurotransmitters in your brain are working, because brain issues like having brain fog, bad memory recall, these are things that are really common in andropause.
Yeah.
So we do a ton of medical history and questionnaires, and then a deep dive conversation lasts about an hour, just going into really, what are your goals? Because, one man might be a professional athlete who needs to be at a certain level of performance. And then I work with a lot of executives. So for them, a big thing is brain function. Like, hey, I used to be able to work 12-hour days and lead these board meetings, no problem. And now if I have a meeting after 3, I'm in trouble.
Right.
So addressing really like, what are your goals? And then what are the tools we're going to need to get there? So hormone testing is very common, but we do also a lot of nutrition panels looking at what nutrient deficiencies do you have, because those can also be precursors for hormones as well, or toxic exposures. So really it's like, what are all the things that you're doing and that you're exposed to that could be throwing things out of balance a little bit? And then how do we correct those? And I think there's also a stigma with more holistic practitioners that like, oh, you're going to give them like 18 things to do or 18 things to take.
Right.
It might be one thing that's going to change 18 things in your life.
Yes.
So it's just about finding the root cause of what's going on, rather than saying like, oh, okay, this is deficient, so then take this supplement, and this is deficient, take this supplement. It's more about a balanced approach and what fits in your own lifestyle. Because if I'm telling you should be coming in for acupuncture because it's amazing for hormones, and you don't live here in Beverly Hills, okay, I'll find you someone somewhere else. But you're bicoastal, maybe it's not practical for you to be coming into the office once a week. And we have to be able to do something that you can do on your own to make those changes.
I love it. And I've had enough, medical issues that have not been healed by the Western medical system that I've gone in for acupuncture for hormones, and, Ayurvedic for digestion and supplements and stuff. So I really believe in what you're talking about. And I love the example of the executive who used to be able to just, kill it all day long, And now after 3 o'clock, it's like, woof, feeling that exhaustion or feeling that brain fog. And that I think a lot of men probably, listening to this would just, I don't know, either chalk that off as I'm getting older or be embarrassed about it or, right. And so they don't have to listening to you. It's like, all right, let's get checked and figure all this out.
It's true. They very much, people will write that off, men and women. It's very easy, like these symptoms of andropause, aging, like hormone imbalance, to write things off, like fatigue. I'm just like stressed. I'm just fatigued. I'm not sleeping well. I probably should take better care of myself. But those are symptoms that are pointing to something underlying that needs to be addressed. And sometimes damage is being done before those symptoms even present themselves. So symptoms aren't something that we just want to shut down without discovering why are these even happening. And also what's interesting is like when men come to see me, it's usually not initially for something like the brain fog. It's something that they're less embarrassed about, like, I used to lift this amount of weight, or I used to exercise 6 times a week. And now, I'm kind of feeling a little sore in the morning. And like, what is that about? And, my doctor gave me testosterone, but then somebody told me, now I'm not going to make my own. And is that a real thing? So it's usually one of those issues. And then as we dig a little bit deeper, you find out like very common symptoms like, I've gained like 10 pounds of body fat and I'm doing what I think is exactly the same thing. And it's still happening to me. I actually don't sleep as well as I used to sleep. And I just thought that was, normal, me getting older. We have young children, but everything is so connected. And so it's really important to look at all those things and say, okay, what's really what's loading the gun here? And then what's pulling the trigger to really make this an issue?
This is so great. I'm thinking of so many men in my life who have different sleep issues or, whatever they're struggling with. And I'm like, oh my God, I wonder, have they gotten all these things checked? Right? Probably not.
Probably not. I'll tell you a story. So my fiance went for his annual physical, and
how old is he?
He is 46.
Okay.
And I'm big on communicating with providers. I work very integratively. So even if men are on testosterone, like I'll be working with their doctor. There's still things we can do, or even if they want to come off of that, supplement. But he went in and ended up getting a referral to get his eyes checked. And his doctor was like, oh yeah, we're going to check your thyroid. And I was like, wow, that's great, because thyroid issues can absolutely contribute to
eye issues
with your eyes.
Totally.
And I was so disappointed to see that all she checked was TSH, which is a precursor to thyroid function.
Yeah.
But it doesn't directly tell you what's going on with your thyroid. It's a hormone that's produced by the pituitary gland in your brain. And then it dictates how all these other hormones work. So I was like, well, she didn't test anything about your thyroid. This is only one test.
That's so amazing.
That happens a lot, like, women, a lot of times with autoimmune diseases, like
that totally happened to me, where it's like my Western doctor was going to check my TSH and my Ayurvedic practitioner was like, wait, no. There's like 4 other parts of the thyroid that we need to check, because otherwise we don't actually know what's really going on.
Absolutely. And with men specifically, a lot of times with anyone, things will get missed with thyroid health if you just test TSH. But men specifically, I see many, many more issues with T3, which is part of thyroid function as well. It's a hormone, than TSH or the main thyroid hormone, which is T4. Like men very commonly, if they have something going on, it's not going to be the first or even second test that a doctor would naturally do when it comes to our standard of care model. So it leaves men just feeling like, all right, well, that's weird, because I really don't feel well.
I don't feel well, right? I mean, I've seen so many men and women in that situation of like, I still don't feel well. And the Western doctor just being like, well, you look fine. It like seems fine. Everything's testing okay. And from your perspective, it's like, oh, there's, it's not just black or white. There's a whole rainbow of things that needs to actually be working and functioning properly, is that why they actually call it functional medicine?
Yeah, I love that term. I never really felt so poignant to me until I was at this Chamber of Commerce meeting. We have to like stand up and introduce ourselves. And I said something about functional medicine. And the guy next to me goes, shouldn't all medicine be functional? I was like, that's a very profound point you made. Indeed, it should all be functional.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's the whole point. Like, it has to fit into what is functional for you.
Yeah.
You know, not everybody can have the same treatment plan and have it be as effective. There is an individual approach that, you know, really needs to go into that.
Yeah.
And particularly with men, you know, talking about like this whole thing with thyroid, men already are not going to be advocates for their health. Like, there's embarrassment that goes along with it.
Yep.
There's like a stigma that goes along with it. They don't want to talk about it. So if you finally get a man to go into a doctor's office and then he's told like, okay, you're fine, what are the chances that he's going to be like,
say,
let's dig a little deeper because I am tired after 3.
Right.
Like, that's just not happening. So the education needs to be there for men to understand, like, these are real issues. Andropause is real, and you don't have to go on feeling like this.
You don't have to suffer. Yeah.
No.
So, okay, let's talk a little bit about the pillars of peak performance. So you talk about having 3 pillars of peak performance. And what are they?
Yeah. So I either think about it as a pyramid or a little Venn diagram, but, you know, performance and then lifestyle and recovery. And, you know, if you think of it as that pyramid with peak performance at the top of that, you have to balance that with your lifestyle and your recovery techniques. You know, if you want to be at a certain level of output when it comes to your performance, you know, it's a spectrum. So if you want to be at the top end of that, the reality is you are going to have to spend more time and effort recovering from that amount of performance. And sometimes we think that only applies to workouts, and it's just not accurate. Like, the amount of calories that you burn using your brain is crazy.
Interesting.
Yeah, you burn a ton of calories using your brain. And even though healthy fats are like so good for the brain, your brain really attacks sugars. So that's why a lot of times when people are sitting and working, they're like dying for like a sweet snack, or they want something to munch on because their brain is just like going, going, going. So those are like things we have to think about. And the lifestyle piece, when you're talking about that fitting into the performance and recovery, is that your lifestyle is unique. So your treatment plan is going to be unique. You know, if you are traveling all the time, you're having symptoms of jet lag, you're being exposed to different toxins that other people are not being exposed to. You don't have a set schedule, your circadian rhythm, your sleep is going to be affected by that. And those are things that someone who's not traveling might not even have to factor into their treatment plan. Like, you want to take supplements, you know, it goes down to like the mode of delivery. If you are not in a position where, you know, you want to go get a vitamin IV infusion, like, we need to make sure that you're able to take things orally, or any of these recovery techniques that you're doing, that you're actually able to physically be there. So those things have to all work simultaneously together. And I find that very possible. I think that unique approach is what I love about my practice and working with men, because a lot of these high-powered men too, if you tell them this is the plan and this is what needs to happen, they're like, okay, it's going in the schedule, it's happening, like we're going to make this work. There's not a questioning involved. There's not like, oh gosh, but what about this? What about that? If you actually make a treatment plan that fits with someone's lifestyle and addresses their performance and recovery goals, it will happen.
I was going to say, right, that addresses their recovery goals and that has been validated, right, with some kind of, you know, with your scientific knowledge, or
absolutely,
right. If it makes sense, then I think men tend to be a lot more willing. What do you see happens when these pillars are out of balance for men?
Burning the candle at both ends, literally, which, you know, we all tend to do. The way our society is structured now and the expectations that are put upon us as humans, as employees, as workers, are very different than they were, you know, even like 50 years ago. And talk about like, people were stressed with a 9 to 5 back in the day, and like having only one spouse working and having 2 kids, and they could afford to own a home. You know, there are a lot of real situations now that didn't exist then. And then also like the health and toxic exposures that we have now that we didn't have then, the way our food is manufactured, the things that we're just putting into our body on a regular basis, bring our body down from a performance level. So it's like, I think that anyone could benefit. Anyone can benefit from treatment at this point.
And I think that's so interesting too, because, you know, we see, especially with COVID happening, certain people who it's like, oh, he was a healthy man in his 50s and, you know, suddenly he's super sick or he died or whatever. Like, you know, I don't claim to be a doctor in any way, shape or form, but I do think that we have an idea of health that we don't actually know what's going on. We're not talking about what somebody's putting in their body or how much sleep they're getting or all these things. It's
Right.
like somebody just looks healthy on a surface level or doesn't have any major diseases that we're tracking.
I think that's a big part of it. This idea that like, oh, if you don't have major diseases, then
You're called
you
healthy.
must be healthy. And we're finding out like more and more every day that is not at all the case,
Yeah.
and I think COVID exposed a lot of that. It exposed a lot of weaknesses in our healthcare delivery system, a lot of areas of opportunity where we need to be working more collaboratively and looking at root causes of issues.
Yeah.
Because, I know people who have died from COVID, and I know people who barely had any symptoms with COVID.
Yeah.
And, it's not a one size fits all approach, but generally it had a lot to do with people's health before this happened. And again, that's not one size fits all either. Like, you don't have major diseases, but we don't know like what this person was exposed to, things that happened way in their past that could still be an issue that they're thinking like, I had pneumonia when I was a kid. Like, what does that even matter?
Right.
Just so many pieces of the puzzle that it's very evident we need to look at a different approach. Like, how has it been, over a year of this? And we're still sitting around like, crap, I guess the only solution is to stay away from each other.
It's
like
amazing.
We have a responsibility to keep ourselves as healthy as possible. I've been treating this entire time.
Yeah.
And I felt like it was just another part of my job, like making sure I was taking the supplementation I need to take, making sure I was like staying healthy, exercising, sleeping enough, keeping my stress in check. Cause all of that factors in to how you're going to respond to illness.
Yeah. So true. You mentioned recovery as one of the pillars, and I would imagine that many people, and men in particular, haven't necessarily had that on their radar. And because I think men in particular, it's like, I go, and then I go, and then I go, and then I go.
Right.
How do you help them get it in their minds? Like, recovery is actually an important part of this path.
I use the spectrum example because a lot of times when they're coming, it's not just like, oh, I want to maintain my current level of performance. Usually I want to get better.
Right.
So the question is, okay, well then, like, what are you willing to do to make that happen? Like, obviously, if you're looking for a change on the right end of the spectrum, what are you willing to do to balance that out on the left side of the spectrum? Because something's got to give. You don't get to just keep pushing. And we've seen this in sports medicine in the last 10 years has had a dramatic shift from being all about performance to, okay, how can we get people to recover really, really well so that then their bodies naturally can go out and perform and do the things that we're doing? And that's with brain health. You're working with professionals who need to be able to perform on a cognitive level and then also on a physical level. It doesn't matter. There's still a spectrum approach that needs to happen. And I think a lot of times like men really understand that, like the idea of like sacrificing something to get something else. So yeah, the recovery piece is huge. And some of it actually is like fun for men because they're like, okay, I'm into like trying things. So, if you tell someone to go and try cryotherapy or infrared sauna, like there's like a physical thing that's happening and they're like, oh, that's kind of cool. Now I know this thing. Acupuncture is like a major one for me that I use just because like that's my area of specialization and what I have my doctorate in. And I just love because it's like so impactful for people's recovery. It's just, I explain it as an adaptogenic medicine. So pretty much like anything is going to be helped because it's just helping your body do better, handle stress better, sleep better, perform better. So it can kind of self-select within the treatment process what your body really needs in that moment. And it might need that you need, more quality sleep. But yeah, that spectrum example is really helpful. And people generally get that. They're like, okay, if I want something on this side, I got to give something up on this side.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, thank you so much for doing this, for supporting men, and, for being someone who's standing out to say you don't have to suffer in these ways and you're not bad for feeling this way. And is there anything else that you want men to know that we haven't covered?
No, the main thing is just that there are options for you. Andropause is a real thing. And just because like mainstream media isn't talking about it as much as menopause is being talked about, it in no way means that there aren't things you can't, you can do. You absolutely can feel like yourself again. That's the biggest thing I hear from men in my practice is, I just don't feel like I used to.
Yeah.
I don't feel like myself.
Yep.
And to be able to have a man then turn around and be like, wow, like I feel like me again.
That's amazing.
It's incredible.
Good. Thank you so much. And where can men find you?
Yeah, so my main platform that I'm on is LinkedIn because I do work with a lot of professionals. So Dr. Nell Smircina. And then my website for my practice, which has a lot of resources for men's health, is PIQUEBH, like BeverlyHills.com, PIQUEBH.com.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
No, thank you so much for having me.
I'm so glad you joined us for today's episode of Man Alive. I hope you enjoyed our conversation and it gave you something to consider and explore in your life. If you like what you heard, I'd be so grateful for you to subscribe and write a quick review that helps men like you find us. And again, head over to shanajamescoaching.com/quiz or text the word ALIVE, ALIVE, to 44144 to get a sense of how you can become a better lover and leader. You'll start to see how you can be both more respected and desired in your unique and genuine way. If you don't feel as confident or as excited about life or love as you'd like to be, this quiz is a really great starting point and will guide you toward a more passionate love life and a more inspiring and successful career. So again, text ALIVE, ALIVE, to 44144 or head over to shanajamescoaching.com/quiz. Join us each week for a new episode of Man Alive.